Here we are then. It's that time of day, night, whatever that you've got in your part of the world for Free Thought Hour. And as usual, we have Tercia from South Africa. Hello, Tercia. How the devil are you?
I am very good, thank you. And I was just thinking before I came on the show that I have a confession to make, and that is that I am converted to a new religion.
Oh.
Well, it's not a new religion. It's actually very well known. I am an adherent of the Lord Ragabush, and he is the Lord God of rugby. And I've just rediscovered my devotion to the one and only, the only true God, Ragabush, who is patron and inventor, creator of the sport of rugby. So,
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we had a good match. We beat France earlier today in the Six Nations, and Jananda is going to be. I don't think it's a match. I think it's training on Sunday. So, but she has the tens. You know, the smaller teams played over 15 minutes. Do you have those?
We do,
Yeah.
but it's called only the young boys play that, and little boys play that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very proud of your daughter. She's amazing. Well, I knew that.
Yes.
Good
Yes.
for
Yeah.
her.
Absolutely. Yes. Very much amazing. Yes. So there's enough about us. Let's get our guest on. He, I can tell you, lives in Springfield. I think it's Missouri, not Illinois, but there's lots of Springfields in America. And the one he lives in is the real one where the Simpsons live. And you can see because he's in their lounge.
Hello, everyone. From Springfield, yes.
Yes.
Home of Bass Pro Shops, home of Cashew Chicken, started right here in this town. We are not actually the home of the Simpsons, but they were kind enough to let me use their living room today for this meeting. So
Good.
My thanks out to all of them for their efforts. So,
well, thank you very much for coming and joining us. And how the devil are you?
oh, it is allergy season here, and I may be doing this on occasions and even sneezing because that's been happening already this morning. So there's that. I apologize in advance if that does happen. So,
Yeah, well, you do live in a very a part of the country which is likely to cause allergies, I'm afraid, don't you? Because
well, it's shockingly arboreal. There's lots of trees. It's amazing. If you look over here on the right, there are trees. If you look over there, there are trees. It's because it's kind of the woods. Any place that you're at in Missouri, state of misery, as some say, we have woods and stuff.
Exactly. It's pollen everywhere, isn't it? You can't avoid it.
Oh, you want to see outside? We've had some very heavy rain, local arealized flooding and stuff and things, I guess. And there is debris all over the ground because the trees have been blooming. So all that stuff was knocked out by heavy rains, and it is just covering everything, every place.
Yeah. Well, at least the rain washes the pollen out of the air briefly.
It's supposed to, but it is not today. Just saying.
Okay. Well, let's hope you can speak long enough to have a chat with Tercia and I for an hour.
Yes, it is actually. It's wonderful to see both of you guys. I have watched a few of your streams, chatted, and it's interesting to talk with you instead of simply watching you guys. You're both very personable, and it's been enjoyable.
Well, thank you. Yes, we do our best.
Thank you so much. It's nice to speak to somebody who's actually confessing to watching some of our streams. It's so nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. He's our single member of the audience.
That's not true. I saw at least 7 people watching one of the times when you guys were streaming. I keep an eye on those sorts of things. So
yeah. We're growing, hopefully. Yeah. So the first question that we ask our victim guests, slip of the tongue there nearly, is how did you get to be the person that you are today? So would you like to that? Because I know you've got a very interesting story. You were in a church band and now you're watching atheist shows. What's gone on?
All kinds of stuff. I was actually thinking about this since you and I briefly talked.
Mm.
Man, that's a long story. So, oh my gosh, I was born here in this town, but we lived in a small city that was actually outside of here called Stratford. So that's where I started grade school at. But we moved and relocated to Kansas, and that's where I first really remember attending church. There's a church in Hutchinson, Kansas called the First Presbyterian Church. Wonderful place, glorious building, shockingly large considering the size of the town. Very progressive. But that was the first church where I was baptized at.
Yeah.
I still may even be registered as a member with them, but spent many years there. Go ahead.
And just clear up something for the benefit of our viewers who may not know, but you're talking now about the state of Kansas, not the city of Kansas, which peculiarly is mostly in Missouri.
Yes, and Kansas and Missouri border each other.
Yes.
So anyway, it's weird to people sometimes in Europe to get an idea. I mean, you've been here, John, from what you've said. They just don't get the idea of the scale. Of course, then you get a country like, Africa, which, there's differences in sizes. But anyways, so we moved to
a country like Africa. You
a
sound
continent.
like
Because there's more than one just inside of it. Yes. So I know my American slipped there for a second.
But I have to say that so I get this often. So South Africa it's such a weird name for a country because we are at the southern tip of the continent of Africa, and you'll be surprised how many South Africans can't get the distinction between a country and a continent. And then you get people who say, when you say you're from South Africa, they say, oh, I know so and so who's in Egypt. But I mean, Africa is just about the size of half of the United States. I might be wrong about that, but talk about scale. It's actually mind-boggling how large the United States is. So I've never been there, but I try to comprehend things in a very literal way. And I don't think most Americans actually realize how massively large your country is.
Not unless you traveled some.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of Americans are quite parochial. They stay put.
Yes, and it's funny because I mean you get these especially big cities. I know some people. Well, I know some people just about everywhere. Really, at this point, I just about do. Gentleman that I talked to in New York City, and he has never really been outside of New York City except for a couple brief trips. And almost every place that he goes and he shops basically at the same place every week. He sees mostly the same people and things like that. He's usually not more than a few dozen blocks, except whenever he maybe takes the subway system or things like that. He doesn't own a car. He hasn't owned a car. I don't think he has a driver's license. He doesn't need them. And yet here where I live at, if you don't have a driver's license, you aren't going hardly any place. We have virtually no public transportation systems or anything like that. And where we were out in Kansas, oh my gosh, the scale is just sometimes it's difficult to explain to people. You can't walk places.
No, it's yes, that's right. Yes, it's odd. It's odd that we have pavements, you have sidewalks, but you hardly ever, apart from in the cities, you hardly ever see anybody walking on a sidewalk.
No, and we don't have sidewalks here in my neighborhood. There aren't any. And the funny thing is, there's a school that's not that far from us, and it isn't until practically you get to where you're on the grounds of the schools that there are sidewalks, because you're going to be, and there's not even enough space to get up there. You don't see kids riding their bikes to school here like what I did out in Kansas with most of the places where I lived, because you can't, and the road isn't wide enough. It's not safe. It's too narrow. Yeah. That's another interesting topic about America that differs I think, very strongly from a lot of other countries.
Hmm.
Of course, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience. We drove from Kansas to Alaska in the early 80s. Have some relatives up there that they did surveying and mining, gold mining.
Hmm.
And my parents worked for them, and I stayed with my relatives in Homer, Alaska there. We drove both directions. So the only foreign country that I have been into is Canada,
Hmm.
and visited the Bahamas once briefly on a cruise. So it's not like I have personal firsthand experience with Europe either. I do have friends that live in various countries. One that I still can't stay in contact with right now is in Northern Ireland,
Hmm.
which is really interesting because he's never been to the States, and it's just kind of funny some of the differences, which we're probably going to discuss some of those topics just as a guess.
Well, let's get back to your story. How did you get into the church and the church band? Because I know you're a guitarist, aren't you?
Yeah, was more so now, was more so than what I am now. So that first church, which is literally the first Presbyterian church in Hutchinson, Kansas. My biological father was a musician. He was on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry twice.
Yeah.
He's been on a few albums, has written some stuff you guys might even remember, but his name was never on any of it because it was as for hire contract.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he was a musician. I didn't grow up with him. They got divorced when I was about 2, so I would only see him about a week or so a year. My mother was always big involved with music, so she encouraged me to get into music. In that church, we had a wonderful director, first clinician that I ever worked with as a kid, named Dave Norman, may even still be in the Hutchinson, Kansas area. The choir was awesome. He was a phenomenal director and musician. Hey, he had a brother who I think did opera. But anyhow, so we were involved with the church, and I did music there at the church. I was in the children's choir. Also did music scholastically. I guess I did fairly well with it. The teachers always seemed to appreciate me. I went to several schools while we were in Kansas because we moved a fair amount, including for 6 months we moved to Washington, D.C. There was no choir there. All the rest of the schools back in Kansas, all of them had choirs, and it was a very competitive, shockingly competitive district. So by the time that I got to around 4th or 5th grade, I think it was probably 5th grade and up, we would have honors choirs.
Yeah.
And we always went to those things, and there were competitions, and we placed really well. After junior high, we moved back here to Missouri due to a variety of various situations, including the economy wasn't particularly great where we were at
Yes.
out there.
Can I just question you a bit about the type of choir that you were in? Because I guess from my knowledge of that part of America, it wasn't a black choir.
When we moved to Washington, D.C., this is very uncomfortable actually to end up discussing. That was the first time I had ever been around people of color.
Mm.
I was the only white kid in my classroom.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is correct or not. I attended, I think they'd shut down now, but it was called Mary Church Terrell, was the school in Washington, D.C. It was not where, more affluent families went.
Right.
And I don't know if this is true or not, but there were like 800 some odd students, which was just mind-boggling massive to me at the time. And there were supposedly like only 8 of us that were white. It probably was a greater number than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
But
got
in
I got to
Kansas,
experience what racism was like firsthand on the
Yeah.
other side of it, because I was the minority at that point there.
yeah. Reverse racism. But in Kansas, though, you wouldn't have had a gospel choir, would you? Because that's peculiarly Southern.
Oh, white gospel kind of scares me. Just going to say that. Anyways, it can be done, and it can be done great, but maybe Kansas isn't the place where that happens. No, because the first Presbyterians aren't really evangelical. So gospel, I mean, we did literally. That's the Good News Bible was the first Bible that I was ever given. What's funny is I think it's just a couple feet over that direction. I still have the darn thing signed by Bill Soul, who isn't with the church anymore because he's probably not even alive. But we still did. Dave was a professional. He was an educator also. So we did some fairly advanced pieces of music for being grade school children.
Yeah.
The kind of advanced that I'm talking about is we did something when I was in junior high that when I was in high school, my music teacher, who thought she was doing a very advanced program, and she was, she brought out a piece of music and she was like, oh, we're going to do this. And it's going to take some work. And it was like, oh, we did that back when I was in junior high.
Old stuff. Yeah.
And she's like, no, you didn't do this piece of music. And I'm like, yes, I did. And she goes, well, then you would know it, wouldn't you? And so I put the piece of music down and I sang my part.
Yeah.
And she was not happy with that.
No.
That impressed her. I was like, it was something we did for an invitational. This is a piece of music I did in junior high. And she's like, well, this is way too advanced for junior high. And it was like, all I can tell you is that we did it and we performed it and we took a 1 at state. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And so that's also what we did in high school. My high school teacher had modeled her program after a collegiate program, a fairly well-respected one. So we didn't just have the large choir. We had a jazz choir. Yes, jazz hands are required for jazz choirs. So it was a smaller group, about a dozen some odd people. And we had partners, and we would do choreography along with the pieces of music. We would go out to... we would perform in public. We would go to anything like nursing homes or stuff like that. We did state competitions. I don't ever remember being involved with the choir where we got anything less than a 1, ever, because that's the sort of music stuff. So here's the funny thing about that. If I were to sing right now, and I'm not, I can't tell the difference between whether I'm killing it or I'm killing people because I can't hear what I'm doing while I'm performing. If I listen back to it, like if we check this out later, I can tell you for fact. And it's not that I'm ever not on pitch. It's not that I'm ever not on time or those sorts of things. That still does not mean you sound good.
No.
There's a difference, and I can't tell. And it's fairly recent that I've actually really discovered, hey, dude, you aren't the vocalist that you imagined that you were. You did great in a scholastic setting. I was very good at that. But outside that range, I have a much, much more limited scope.
Yeah, well, it's very different singing solo to singing in a choir because you've got all the other voices who are making the waves, and you can fit in with them. You can even harmonize by picking up the interval.
You match with them. It's a very different dynamic. It's a very different thing. And I did not do a lot of solo work competing, a little bit, and I rated okay on those, but I never got more than a 2. And the judges might have even just been being nice. There's that. So I grew up kind of imagining, oh, I'm a musician. I have a father who is a professional musician, and he was. I am constantly doing music because that was a good portion of what I did.
Yes.
And so I thought, I'm a musician, and yet I almost never spend any time practicing. I can barely sight read. I did not see the hours that my peers that were not doing as well were spending, or the lessons that they were taking, or the idea that musicians should and could practice, maybe even needed to, regardless of whatever level of talent you have. And I'm not that talented. Some, but not that much. So anyways, it's funny. I don't know how it works for other people, but still yet at 53 years old, I'm still figuring out and discovering some of these things about myself. But that's kind of how the music and the church thing happened, is because outside of school, the only places you can really do music for the most part is either bars, which if you're underage, that's kind of not the thing, or church. That's pretty much it. You've got schools, and once you graduate, you really can't do the school thing, church, or bars.
Which grieves me.
to perform at a bar, I suspect you also have to be quite good, because I don't imagine people in bars being particularly forgiving towards bad artists. So this connection between music and churches is fascinating to me, because it's something that I've been following as I'm watching social media, and almost everybody. Hello, Rob. Nice to see you here. I love your home as well. Rob is saying, I love the color scheme. I mean, the green and the pink, it just goes beautifully with everything else. But the strong connection between music and all forms of religion is fascinating. So I met a South African actor who's also a Buddhist. I met him on Monday night, and he allowed me to play, I don't know if it's the right word, but to coax sound from his the bowl, the
Singing bowl.
The singing bowl. That's right. That's right. So you have that, but I mean, in the one singing bowl that he had, it's this very, very thick copper alloy, and you go around. You have one, but
no, this is a plastic cup. I was joking. I'm sorry.
That's the same thing, basically. It's just plastic. And then last night, I listened to, on Afrikaans radio on Thursday nights. There's a Muslim devotional program, and I was listening to the imam doing that call, and it sounds very strange to my Western ears. But is there a religion, and I'm talking across all sorts of religion, that doesn't incorporate music?
Yeah.
And when music doesn't play a very, very prominent role.
Pastafarianism?
Don't know.
I'm not sure if Pastafarianism is really considered a real religion. It's actually pretty significant in Shintoism, which is probably the only religion currently that I'm somewhat interested in. Hinduism, I know they have a lot of music in their festivals. Those people can shake some butts. They can dance.
Yes. Well, I wanted to say that it grieves me that religions commandeer music and use its undoubted power to attract attention and bond people together, communal enjoyment. And they use it as a tool to foist their nonsense on us. And it's, like you said, it's quite difficult to get it outside of church. Where would I go if I wanted to? I'd have to find, actually, I know a music teacher who's in a choir, so I could probably join that. But it's quite difficult to do music unless you're in a church.
Well, even scholastically, a shocking amount of the music that we did was religious. And I do mean, I don't ever remember a single time of any of these invitationals where at least almost half of the pieces that we were performing or more were religious. Not a lot of the music we were doing was secular. One of the most complicated and amazing pieces that I remember, now I can't even remember the title of it, but it was from a poem by Della Gioio. So I mean, that was completely secular. The arrangement was, I think, by Glass. I can't remember Glass's first name right now, but anyways, he did some very interesting music. Because the truth, am I pissing off the real God? Well, nobody ever knows if they're pissing off the real God or not. That's kind of one of the problems. Anyways, just my opinion. It's there has been a lot of contribution to music. I think of any country, any culture, an awful lot of music has been non-secular. I don't know whether or not they hijacked that or not, but it is something interesting to consider, and it's difficult to. I'll be honest. Okay, the reason why I was up at this church, the main thing was because I wanted to play music. If it was lifting up others in praise through music, that was okay with me. I don't have a problem with others, worshiping or whatever. But it was mainly because I wanted to get out and actually do something. I know people that's the only reason they do it. Now I was doing it for free up here, but I know other people that they're employed. They
Yeah.
get paid a salary.
Yeah.
They go to the church, they pray and all the other stuff and things like that. You talk to them after hours. They aren't religious.
No,
They're
they just,
musicians.
yeah. They're just going along for the sing. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I used to be a semi-professional musician in my spare time, and I did it for 10 years, and it was great. It was terrific fun. This was back in the early days when the Beatles had just hit the stage, and they had inspired a lot of us to pick up the guitar. So I was in a band that was playing that sort of music, and then unfortunately along came disco, and we were we were replaced by a guy who put a disc on a turntable and then lowered the needle. That was all he had to do.
Well,
I
but then
just want to,
Boston came out during that time. So, I mean, you could have picked your guitar back up again, which is also possibly why Boston didn't do quite as well as maybe they should have, but that's a different subject. You
Yeah.
were going to say something, Tercia.
I was just going to say this whole thing about music and religion that are so intertwined fascinates me because music is, I think, as primitive and instinct as religion is. And I remember reading in Dan Barker's first book, the title now, shocking, but I don't remember the title, but in the first book by Dan Barker that I read, so he was also a musical director, and he actually explained how there's a certain combination of tonalities that just tugs at the brain strings. I'm saying the brain strings because people say the heartstrings, but it's actually, it resonates with the what happens in our brains when we hear certain music. And that's exactly why music has an impact on everybody. I mean, you can have even deaf people can feel the vibration. And I think that's one of the things that I would like us to rediscover as humans, is why we are pulled towards religion is perhaps because it really tugs at the most primitive experiences that we have as human beings. And it's also been proven that if you have random collection of strangers who don't know one another and you sit them down and you have them clap rhythmically together, and you have another group of random people and you just ask them to spend 5 minutes together, and then you rate their experience as where a bond occurred, then the people who clapped together will feel that they have a bond with the people who they don't know. But the fact that they spent 5 or 10 minutes clapping rhythmically together creates a bond. And I think maybe it's time as humanists get some rhythmic clapping together going or something like that.
On the subject of deaf musicians, I'd like you to check out Evelyn Glennie. She's a percussionist, a professional percussionist, and totally deaf, but she feels it through her abdomen somehow, and she is utterly fantastic. I'm sure there's videos, but I recommend her.
Wow. But please continue with your story about the church and so can you, middle school, high school, and then what happened? Did you what happened?
Well, that's actually kind of an interesting point to jump off on. So I realized someplace in high school, gosh, man, I'm spending at least 4 hours a day, 5 days a week doing music. I really like music. I think I'm pretty good at music, except as you know, now I realize, nah, not so much. But anyways, I heard these people, professional musicians, and I was like, I can do that. Now that wasn't untrue, because there are some professional musicians out there that are not really that skilled, not really that talented. However, I personally knew people that were far more talented and far more skilled than I was ever going to be, that weren't ever going to get recording contracts. And I wasn't real sure what to make about that, except that the idea that I was going to be a professional musician was probably slim. So I thought, What would happen if I got into production? What if I became a producer? What if I became a recording engineer? So I went to Art Institute of Dallas, Texas, and this was 1990. And it was pretty darn cool. And I had never been in a city that large, because Dallas, Fort Worth area is pretty big. And I'd never been shot twice, which happened the end of the first semester. And I spent 36 days in Baylor Medical Center, had my intestines resectioned twice. Right arm is all nerve and tendon transfers, and do the weirdest thing, because this hand is nearly flat on the inside of it compared to this one, and hands have to be round for them to actually do their job. The surgeon did a great job putting this back together, but it will forever be flatter than what the other one is, which makes that weird little thing possible.
So
go ahead.
It seems to me you put yourself in the line of fire, because we know that people get shot in Dallas.
That point in time, especially, yeah, they were on a very short list of cities where people were being shot and killed in the United States at that time. But the thing was, is where I was living at, I worked for the apartment complex for a short while when I first moved there. My job was, I had to sort, if somebody wanted an apartment fumigated, there were records for that. I was sorting that. If there was a domestic disturbance, I was seeing those. I saw the ugly underside of that apartment complex, several years worth. And there, outside of, some guy got drunk and started shouting at his wife, or cops were called to this address, or there was a mugging that was in a parking lot that was in the back of the apartment complex. It happened just a month or so before I got there, but it was very early in the morning. There was not good lighting out there. People had been warned, and the woman got her purse snatched, and that was about it. The area was called the Village, and to this day, if you tell people, "Oh, I lived in the Village in Dallas, Texas," and they're like, "Well, that's really safe," and then I say, "Well, I was shot twice there," and they're like, "Not in the Village," because that really doesn't happen, or at least didn't in that area. It was considered very safe. It was part of the reason why the school used that apartment complex as part of effectively off-campus housing. But just 2 months or so after I was shot, some guys broke into a woman's apartment and murdered her. They had a string of incidents in that area. And they never caught the guys, the best that I know of. They didn't even try to. And it was, people like, "Well, you were in a really bad place." I was at an apartment complex that I saw 5 to 10 years worth of their records where nothing significant had happened. I was underneath my bedroom window at my apartment complex, inside my car. It was a Saturday afternoon. There were 2 birthday parties going on. There were people all over the place. It was very random. It wasn't, the relative safety. Safety is a very relative thing. Where I'm at is far less problematic than where I was then at that point in time. And yet I have friends who served in the military that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of them, we were having a discussion, and he said, "Dude, it's difficult for me." He's got chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, as I do also. And he's like, "It's difficult for me because I'm almost more scared here, home, than I was actually deployed, because some of the places that he has to go into St. Louis and some other areas that are known as not particularly safe for some of the work that he does." And he goes, "It's more dangerous. It's more dangerous than when I was deployed." And this guy shared with me something. It's maybe this isn't something I should share. He shared something with me I won't ever forget. He goes, "Saran wrap." And I was like, "Saran wrap?" And he goes, "Yes. If you have a body and there are parts and you need to make sure it all stays together, Saran wrap. Don't accept a substitute." Because he was a medic, and he was having to pull guys and gals out of porta potties that had turned their weapons on themselves in Iraq. It was a bit of information that me, as a survivor of gunshot, we were discussing this stuff, and it was a bit of information he shared with me that I won't ever forget. And he's like, it's less safe here than what it was in an active war zone at
Yeah.
times. The probability of being shot, it was higher. It is higher, and
Yeah.
that's
Well,
kind of concerning.
there is a statistic about this because I forget which period from which year to which year the statistic applies to, but
Yeah,
there
it's
was
not a all times, all places kind of thing, and that's something, somebody be like, oh, that's not true. Oh, it's not true in all situations, but there are
but
situations where it is unfortunately very true.
there was a period when more Americans were killed in the USA than American military were killed in their war zones.
Yep.
Can I? Sorry, living in a country that I think has one of the highest per capita murder rates in the world, South Africa has many claims to fame, some of which are positive and others which are really, really negative, like our murder rate and our crime statistics, especially our violent crime statistics, and also our gender-based violence statistics are shocking. But I always, when I hear Americans speak, and I do follow the American news actually quite more diligently than I follow news in my own country, especially these days with politics. And it makes me feel better when it makes me feel better about South Africa when I watch American politics, which is deeply ironic and sad in some ways. But we don't appreciate, as human beings, we don't appreciate how statistics work. And what you said now just reminded me again that, to say that statistically your risk of being raped in South Africa, 1 out of every 6 women in South Africa will be raped. However, as a white woman living in a relatively safe area, my personal risk is probably way lower than the risk of a colleague who lives 5 blocks down in the same town. Because where I live, I've never had to lie on the floor to shelter from stray bullets because the gangsters are shooting at one another. And that's something that strikes me as a very, at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because yes, those statistics are accurate, and politicians use those statistics to say we're doing good or we're doing badly. But for the individual, the statistic actually doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter what the statistics are. If I get shot, I got shot, like you will know.
Yeah.
So the statistic to you as an individual person,
Yeah.
it's really completely irrelevant. It does have relevance. I'm not saying statistics are irrelevant, but I find it fascinating how many parallels there are to the United States and South Africa. And I often wonder whether it's because we both colonized countries. So let's look at John.
So a couple things about that. I think Unbiased Science podcast recently did some stuff on relative risk versus they discuss how risk works and statistic works. Now it's more from a health standpoint, but it's still applicable. And that's one of the things I think that they also bring up is because, like, say with COVID-19, people are like, what are you talking about? 3 million people dead. I didn't even know anyone that got sick. And it's like, okay, maybe you personally didn't, but the fact is 3 million some odd people ended up dying. Same thing with, like you're saying, laying on the floor. There are people who seem to think that the United States is like just constant gunfights. And I tell you what, I've been some places where you will hear gunfire. And sometimes, like where I'm at right now, you will sometimes hear it. And that's because that's somebody that's on private land that's outside of the city limits. And it's illegal to do that. And they're just target shooting. I've been places where it wasn't target shooting. That's not what you were hearing. But like laying on the floor to avoid bullets type of stuff, I've never, ever in my life, in 53 years, been in that situation in any place in the United States, anywhere that I've lived. There have been some places where maybe you should. But relative risk versus, and I can't even think of the correct term right now because I have problems with sometimes remembering specific words, especially nouns. There is a difference, and you're right. People are like, well, that doesn't affect me. It hasn't happened to me. I didn't see that. So therefore, it's not real. They will literally deny it just because it's outside the realm of their personal experience.
Yeah.
And
the
that's a
word
really important topic to end up getting into, so you understand how it works. Please go ahead, John.
the word you're seeking is probably absolute, relative risk versus absolute risk.
That's at least one of them, yes.
Yeah. So I found that statistic, and it came out on October the 4th in 2017 on NBC News, and it is this: since 1968, more than 1.5 million Americans have died in gun-related incidents, according to data from the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. By comparison, approximately 1.2 million service members have been killed in every war in US history, according to estimates from the Department of Veteran Affairs. So there you go. You kill more people at home than you do in wars.
Well, if that one isn't upsetting enough for you, this one of the friends that I was talking about that chronic post-traumatic stress. So he's a former coworker, friend, veteran. He does a lot of volunteer work with veterans because one vet dies at least every 22 minutes. I mean, it's on his license plate. More vets die at home than they do deployed. Also, oftentimes by their own hand.
Yeah.
There are issues, folks. We've got issues in society. Oh, and before, because John knows this because we talked for a while. I was at one point a certified firearm instructor, a state certified firearm instructor. We were the only program that was endorsed by the Department of Safety by my state at that time. So, we're talking about how did you get to where, who are you now? How did you get there and stuff like that? That was even one of the things. I imagined for most of my life that I was a centrist leaning conservative, and that is not true. And it took some conservatives to help me work through that and figure this out, because blatant tribalism, I was like, well, when I was growing up, all good people go to church because all good people fear God, and all good people also, well, they are Republicans because that's what all the good people do. And then those Democrat people, oh, they're just weird and freaky and they aren't very nice and they think things, then they don't go to church. And I didn't know anybody else that wasn't that way. So I wanted to align myself with those people that were around me that were role models in positions and positions of authority. So I thought that's what I was. But anyways, the certified firearm instructor thing, John was all like, and oh my gosh, and then you get shot. And I was like, no. I got shot in 1990. I became a certified firearm instructor like in the 2000s. This was a lot later. So in a perfect world, everybody could walk around with whatever it was they want, because if it was perfect, then they wouldn't do things that were harmful for other people. There wouldn't be anything like mechanical failures. No, there would be no accidental or unwanted discharges and things like that. But if the world was perfect,
good luck with that.
Firearms, or you wouldn't need to defend yourself in the first place. There'd be no need for it. And we aren't in a perfect world. It isn't perfect. I bought into some bad ideas. I thought the idea, well, if we just get more people trained, if we just teach more firearm safety,
so they get better at killing.
Well, but that's the thing. You're not killing. You're trying to defend yourself. That's the mental standpoint. Whether it actually is or not, that's the idea. I can stop this problem if it happens, except the reality is the data does not support that happens.
No.
1 in 4 out of the most trained, you get very, very trained, very proficient professionals. And 1 in 4 of the shots that are fired during the confrontation actually hit their target. Those other 3 have to go some other place.
Yeah.
I don't care which direction you want to end up looking at it. The numbers don't work out. It's not realistic. But I bought into that. I accepted it because it supported my tribe. It supported the things that I wanted to believe were true. And they aren't. They do not withstand scrutiny. And it took me some time to work through that and figure those things out.
I'm so sorry. Was there a key event? Sorry, I was going to ask, was there a key event that made you begin this process of reevaluating your stance, or was it a
2020.
gradual? Sorry.
2020, the year. It was gradual and there was a key event. Yes, see, that's the funny thing. When people become polarized or even to the point radicalized, because I
Yeah.
think that was starting to dip into some stuff that certainly in your countries are in the range of being radicalized. Okay, here, that's okay. But it's certainly very polarized. Unless there's a watershed event, generally, once somebody becomes polarized or radicalized, there may not be a way back. It was a gradual process and a series of things, but then also 2020, the election and COVID-19. And I saw all these people on Facebook making the most outrageous claims. I had a woman argue with me for a couple of days. She knew for a fact they were grinding babies up and stuffing them into those little vials. Had a guy that was talking about that there was metal growing on his skin because he had been he'd been vaccinated. Vaccines weren't even out of phase 3 testing at that time.
No.
This guy did this. I saw some of the just most brain bursting stuff, and I had people threaten to kill me. I had one that a friend of mine who works for the Department of Defense ended up filing the FBI report for me because I've got severe anxiety and chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm like, this is really wigging me out. So she filed the report. I had some sous chef in Montgomery, Ohio, threatened to find me, beat me with I forget if it was a wrench or a bat, and they then fantasized that I would scream like a girl, and then they explicitly stated they were going to dump my body in a river. And I still have all these screenshots from this stuff. The thing was, it wasn't any big deal. They had just almost anybody that you could see in the news at this point in time. They had plans to go. They had a list. I was on a kill list at one point.
Only in America can these things happen.
I had to do a little bit of work to figure out where this person was even at, but it turned out that they probably were female, was a sous chef, and in Montgomery County or the city of Montgomery. I'm not even sure. I don't remember right now. Ohio. But no, I've had some people from overseas make some very interesting comments on occasions too. Just maybe not as frequently as some of the people that I encounter in the U.S. But that was it. Seeing these people. Go ahead.
No, continue. Finish your sentence. Finish your thought. Sorry, it's the delay. Damn internet.
Yeah, these things happen. It was watching. I had bought into listening to an awful lot of people that I did not understand that they were far right. I did not really understand that I was far right. I mean, I was constantly being told that online and stuff like that. But when people are like, "Oh, dude, you're just one of those crazy gun nuts," was I? I don't know. In some regards, that's not an inaccurate description. Of course, now I'm one of those liberal anti-gun nuts.
Pinko.
But the election and watching these people that I had trusted say stuff that I knew was wrong. That was the thing, because for so long I'd listened to them. It's like, oh yeah, they're right. Oh, listen to that. They're right. You go, you oh yeah. And then they started saying the quiet stuff out loud. And I'm just like,
yeah.
Wait, what was that you said? Because that certainly you can't be saying that, because that even contradicts stuff that you've said previously. And that completely does not align with anything that I support. And I kept hearing more and more and more from these trusted politicians and people in various positions. And that whole thing, could I be wrong? It's an astonishingly powerful question everyone should ask themselves routinely. Fact check yourself.
Yes.
Could I be wrong about the most simple thing? Did I get the price right? Did I get the number right? Is this statistic right? Is this actually true? Ask, go, look, find credible sources. People talk about having a crisis of faith. I had a crisis of politics. That was my tribe. And I had very heavily invested a lot. I mean, so far as to literally become a state certified firearm instructor.
Yeah.
So seeing these things and realizing this isn't cool. These are not things that I support. What is it that I am supporting? What is it that is meaningful to me? What matters? What do I stand for? Who am I? What is it that actually aligns with what I support? So I had to start going through and looking at this stuff very, very closely. And I'm still doing it.
So you're talking about your political realignment. What about God?
That was part of it, because that was also part of the tribalism. Because again, that whole thing of, well, God-fearing people go to church, and those God-fearing people are Republicans, and those it was all part of the same kind of group sort of identity. You know, you belong to this group does this, so therefore you do this, or otherwise you're not part of this group. But there were things, I told you about this, John. I said, even when I was a very young kid, we'd go to church and I'd hear the stories. And even, I mean, as a young child, I'm talking like preschool age, there was some of the stuff that I'm just like, I didn't really know the word at that time, but it was like, bullshit.
Yes.
That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. I've never, even as a very, very young child, the ideas, some of the things that were expressed, more than stretched my bounds of credibility. They far surpassed anything that I could imagine could be real. But I accepted because I was being told that by other people that I trusted, and because, of course, God. So it must be true. But the older that I got, the more I heard these things, the less it withstood scrutiny. The more I actually studied the Bible, because some of the churches we attended, like Seventh-day Adventist, you spend a lot of time studying Bible, especially a lot of reading in Revelations, which I don't really know if that's considered really studying the Bible or not. But that wasn't the only area that we had. I mean, I literally went to a Seventh-day Adventist school for a while, and we were required to read and study and memorize. Otherwise, there could be consequences.
Ooh, hell.
So it is a long process, and it's kind of difficult to document, especially considering that we're coming up on time here. Ask yourself, could I be wrong? It is always possible. You are human. We are fallible. We make mistakes. I have made some astonishing things we will not be discussing on a video stream. And everybody has something like that. Everybody has done something that's questionable. Everybody has had thoughts that just don't withstand scrutiny, because we're not perfect. We're flawed. We have motivations, wants, desires. We wish to be accepted. We wish to sometimes be things maybe we're not or can't be, or at least aren't yet. Ask, could I be wrong? Figure out what is actual at this time, at least the best, most accurate understanding that we have at this time. And it's always okay to say, I don't know. God, I love that.
Oh, I love that. So I just love that it's okay to say, I don't know, because if that is the only correct answer at any given moment, just
be honest.
And I think it is the correct answer more often than it isn't.
Sometimes it's the only honest answer.
And it's the closest to correct, because you know, most of the time we really do not know. So I want to ask you, if you had what's your motto? What's your current life motto?
Yes.
I'm between those things. I'm not really I'm not entirely sure right now. I was even thinking about that also before this cast of, where are you now? What would you identify as? What would you tell people? And I'm not sure.
Do you have a message or a mission? What do you?
I'm trying to promote.
Well, maybe that's a good motto. I'm not sure.
Really seriously, maybe I should get a T-shirt with that printed on it, because I got a few. John saw one of mine that said something about GMOs are safe and vaccines are But anyways, I try to promote critical thought, rational skepticism. That's something I'm involved with that community. I do some volunteer work with that. I'm permanently stable. There is no job. My career, I was a designer. I actually helped create this thing that we're using right now. And I do mean not, I made the internet. No, I, with thousands of other people, helped do this. But I contributed in ways like I was involved with the W3C consortium, steering committees with web standards. I taught a semester of accredited college. It was design, intro to design course. Something I wrote was picked up by college, Monash University in Australia, was used for an accredited class there. So there's things that I have done that may or may not be notable. I might have been somebody of some sort of merit at some point in time. I was ranked in the top third of experience and knowledge for Photoshop at one point, helped create certification tests and those sorts of things. Literally was hired for like 4 certification tests by, and most of these companies are gone now.
Yeah. Who needs
all these places are just, yeah, they're just water under the bridge now at this point.
Yeah.
But think critically, be kind to yourself. That is a difficult thing for a lot of people to do. And I mean, in a fair way. That doesn't mean coddle you or coddle yourself, cater to your whims and desires. Be kind, be genuinely kind to yourself, be truthful. Always ask, could I be wrong? Try to think critically, try to think rationally. Sometimes it's difficult. There's specific methods. You can't just simply say, well, I'm being critical about this, so therefore I'm thinking critically. That's not how critical thought works. If you have questions.
I have 3 questions.
Sure.
So that's my thing. I do questions in list form. So with just under 4 minutes to go, I'm going to ask, number 1, do you have a favorite podcast? If you have one, what is it? That's the second question. And then the third question, do you believe that we have free will?
I have attention deficit disorder, so me and podcasts don't go really well. I've been picking it up more recently. Unbiased Science Podcast is probably the one that I most often frequent at this point in time.
Okay, that's a new one for me. Is the title Unbiased Science Podcast?
Yes, and they are on Facebook also. Yes.
I'm taking notes. Unbiased Science Podcast. Thank you very much for that.
Those nerdy girls and Thinking is Power are 3 that I try. If I catch them on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever I catch them at, I follow those 3.
Yeah.
Almost religiously. There's less worshiping, but it's pretty frequent.
You know that we interviewed who is shucks,
Melanie Treesick King.
Melanie.
That's it. You know, did you see our interview with her?
I might have been in the chat and might have been providing some links to help provide some resources while you guys. There might be some volunteer work that's done sometimes. So.
Okay.
You might even find my name on at least one item on the Thinking is Power website currently right now. It's a very small explanation for a logical fallacy. So I do some volunteer work in that space on occasions.
What do you like on transparencies? Because I've got, as you can see, I've got a transparency here for FreeThought Hour, but I need one for views on the news.
That's something I think we should probably try to tackle off this topic, because she did have one other question. There was the podcast thing, and then what was it? The free will?
Do you believe we have free will?
Okay.
That's my thing.
One of the things that Melanie Treesick ends up doing, and I'll try to make this quick, is basically how confident are you? Could you put that on a scale? Why do you feel confident? So the short answer is probably not. Probably not. And I'm not sure exactly what to think of that or how to even completely frame that. But if you look at how the universe works from a scientific standpoint, the probability that we have what we believe to be free will is non-existent. I cannot levitate off this chair and do a triple backspin hanging above this because free will isn't real. I can't violate the laws of physics. If I could make anything that I wanted to happen at any point in time, the proof is I can't. So there's that. Otherwise, I chose to be here today and I've enjoyed myself. This has been a great time.
We are very grateful for that. It So
Yes, indeed. Yes, thank you for coming. So you've got a guest lined up for next week, I believe, Tercia.
Yes, and I have forgotten his name. Did you write it down?
Oh dear. So I'll find it for you. It's probably in Messenger, isn't it?
Yes, he's a philosopher, and he's at Oxford University. And I read an article that he wrote on about not the Stoics, about skepticism as the philosophy of skepticism that that comes. It's actually from Philo, the Greek philosopher Philo. So it's it's Johnny
Thompson.
Johnny, that's it. That's our guest. He's agreed. I read the article on Big Think, and I reached out to him, and he said yes. So next week we are talking. Please join us if you can. Anybody watching, listening, skepticism, which touches upon what we spoke about tonight.
Yes, that sounds fascinating. Questions. I will be there for that myself.
Good. Well, there you go. Well, thank you very much. We've come to the end of the show, and we're looking forward to the next one. Bryan, you've been fantastic. Thank you.
It has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And to everyone who is watching, thanks for joining us.
And thanks to you again, Tercia, for your stalwart help. Say bye-bye.
Goodbye. It's only a pleasure.